So we're continuing today with our work on Immuno, looking initially at the way that risk was communicated on the product packaging and the product labelling. Then we will turn to some of the other issues, a short section on donors, and then a short section on other communications between the company and entities within the United Kingdom, before turning to Travenol, and the product in particular there is Haemophil. So we start with Immuno, same company that we were dealing with yesterday. As we heard yesterday, Serological Products Limited, the UK-based company, applied for a product license for cryobilin in December 1972, and as part of that application, it submitted a set of labels, draft labels, and a draft of the information sheet, sometimes known as the data sheet, that went with the product. The labels, as I mentioned yesterday, contained the information that the product was prepared from a plasma pool of 1,000 donors who had tested negative for hepatitis-associated antigens. The draft direction circular, which we looked at yesterday, but I think it's worth bringing up again, is SHPL 5071_181, please, Cernic. And if we could have page 25, please. And the section entitled Manufacture and Composition. This says, cryobilin is prepared from a pooled plasma of healthy donors and freeze-dried for stabilization. All donors whose plasma is used for the production of cryobilin are tested at each donation for their GPT level and the absence of AU-SH HA antigens, hepatitis-associated antigen. Any donor who has a history of pathological transaminase level or a positive AU-SH HA antigen test is permanently excluded from the donor program. Despite these precautions, the risk of transmission of homologous serum hepatitis can only be diminished and not completely eliminated. A couple of points to pick up from there, sir. The first is the reference to the GPT level, which I understand to be an alternative phrasing of the ALT level, so a measure of kidney function. And you will hear in some of the evidence that we go on to today that this was a requirement that the German authorities had in place at the time. Immuno, being an Austrian company, obviously have the German market, a significant market for blood products, right on its doorstep. The other point to be raised from there is the other testing, which is, as we discussed yesterday, for the various antigens which are listed there, and then the comment at the end that despite the precautions, the risk can only be diminished and not completely eliminated. If we could go, please, to page 29 of the same document. This is part of the same data sheet which is given with the drug. So you have this section, which is about the composition, and then a little later on you have a section headed side effects. And at the bottom of that page you can see side effects are rarely observed during treatment with cryobilin, though the following reactions may occur. First is an allergic reaction, and then onto the next page, please, Cernic. Point 2, despite the precautions taken in the selection of donors, the risk of transmission of homologous serum hepatitis cannot be entirely excluded when administering human coagulation factors. That is the hepatitis warning that was in the data sheet. Thank you, Cernic. We can take that off the page now. The product license was approved in March 1973, as we heard yesterday. The inquiry, have identified no evidence to suggest that the product information was modified as a condition of that license. So it seems that that draft is what was approved. There is some criticism that emerges of the warning in 1975, and this is in a series of letters between Dr. Dain of the Middlesex Hospital Mr. Berry of Immuno Limited, the UK company, and the DHSS as well. And the chain of correspondence is instructive in a number of regards. It concerns a report from Dr. Dain that a child under his care, a 14-month-old child, had become infected with hepatitis B following the use of cryobuline, or a concern that the child might become infected. If we could have the first letter, please. It's MHRA 003331 underscore 108. We can see that is from the School of Pathology at the Middlesex Hospital to Mr. Berry, who we referred to yesterday. It says, Mr. Berry, you recently sent Professor Stewart through me 2 single-dose boxes of cryobuline for use in the Middlesex Hospital. The batch numbers are given, sir. As the correspondence develops, there is an error which creeps in about which batch is being referred to. I'm not going to go to that. I don't think it is relevant to the points that are being discussed. One of those batches is now held in reserve. That batch was given to a 14-month-old haemophiliac child. The diagnosis of haemophilia had been made by Professor Stewart, and the date is given. 1 milliliter was held back for HBsAg, that's hepatitis B surface antigen testing, after the cryobuline had been given. This was positive for HBsAg on duplicate screen test, positive on repeat duplicate screen test, and neutralized completely by immune human, rabbit, and horse antiserum, but not by normal human, rabbit, and horse serum. Expressed quantitatively in our own units, the batch contains approximately 1 mH unit of HBsAg per 0.1 milliliters. We were working well within our limits of detection. If we could go on to the next page, please, Cynic. As we were unable to detect HBsAg in 2 previous batches of cryobuline, I was disappointed to find this positive batch. It is not possible to be exactly quantitative in estimating the likelihood of a donor screened as negative by PHA. That's a particular type of test, and we'll come back to it in the rest of the correspondence. It is not possible to be exactly quantitative in estimating the likelihood of a donor screened as negative by PHA causing this level of contamination in a pool without knowing details of manufacture, but I am surprised that we can detect antigen if all original donations have been, as you assured me, tested by PHA. In view of the recent UK experience with factor VIII concentrates, I do not consider the warning about homologous serum hepatitis on the leaflet to be adequate, particularly when the product has been shown to contain HBsAg. I will send a copy of this letter to colleagues who may be interested. If we could expand the letter, please, Cernick. We can see that it's copied to Dr. Holgate, Dr. Krask, and Dr. Cleghorn. Dr. Holgate is a official within the DHSS. The next piece of correspondence is MHRA 003331 underscore 107. This is an internal memorandum from Dr. Holgate within the DHSS. It says, Dr. Andrews, could you thank Dr. Dain for this and say we are looking into it? 2, find out from Dr. McGrath the details of this batch. I would hope we can disprove the underlined para, i.e. we would not, and have not, released a batch known to be positive and then rely on the label warning. I have already told Dr. Dain we would never consider this, see previous correspondence. 3, I have talked with Mr. Berry and will report to you. 4, the whole matter, when you have the facts, needs reporting to Mr. Mann. 5, I wonder if Mr. Taylor should be consulted on the possible libel. A couple of points to pick out from that. Dr. McGrath is somebody whose name came up yesterday. He is somebody who worked for NIBSC, so was involved in testing the products. The possible libel I take to be a reference to the suggestion that the warning was not adequate.
It's very unlike the libel which normally comes before the courts, I have to say.
I will not try to give my understanding of libel law, sir, but but that was Dr. Holgate's concern. If we could have the next document, please, Cernic, which is MHRA 00-33321 _ 105. A letter dated the 17th of July, 1975, a couple of days after the previous previous memorandum, which was the 15th of July, 1975. This is from Mr. Berry at Serological Products Limited, and it is a response to Dr. Dain. He says this: Dear Dr. Dain, I wish to thank you for your letter dated the 14th of July 1975, but I and my colleagues in Vienna are very surprised by your results. Their records, the batch, the number is given, are on the same level as the earlier batches you have received and upon which you have commented most favourably. They use Ausria 2 in the normal way and routinely repeat after adding HbAb, and in this instance, no reduction in values occurred. The next point in your letter regrettably indicates a misunderstanding between us. This concerns your phrase, I am surprised that we can detect antigen if all original donations have been, as you assured me, tested by PHA. I said that our protocols, which we submit to MRC, stipulate 1. Donors CEP negative, 2. Donations CEP negative, 3. Pooled plasma CEP and RIA negative, 4. Final product RIA negative. I added that we were experimenting with PHA testing, and if this was shown to be an improvement, I understood it would be adopted as a routine. I regret this misunderstanding and feel it necessary to put the record straight. Since discussing this with you, I have now learned that after 12 months' experience with hemagglutination tests, the trial project has been abandoned as they are dissatisfied with the results. Our phrase warning about homologous serum hepatitis was submitted to and accepted by the Committee on the Safety of Medicines as part of our product license. This also requires that our material is not only tested in Vienna, but also by the MRC, where Ausria 2 is also used. The batch was duly submitted and an authorization notice was received from the DHSS on the 11th of June 1975. I have discussed your letter at length with Dr. Holgate, and I am making further inquiries. Copies of this letter have also been circulated to those interested, and additionally to Dr. R.D. Andrews, who is now the person responsible for blood products at the DHSS Medicine Division, and with whom I have also discussed this matter. We are continually looking for improved tests for quick and accurate donation screening and for more sensitive final product testing, hence our great interest in the work you are doing. On this occasion, however, the great disparity between results is so noticeable that we wonder if you would consider a repeat test on a fresh sample of the same batch. If we could just go to the bottom of that letter, Cernic, we can see that it is copied to Dr. Holgate, Dr. Andrews, Dr. Krask, and Dr. Cleghorn. If we could go over, please, Cernic, to MHRA 00-33321 _ 102. This is Dr. Dain's reply to Mr. Berry, dated the 18th of July 1975. Dear Mr. Berry, please note, and he refers to another letter, that it was batch, it gives the number that was used, and not the other batch, which we still hold and have not tested. In your letter to me, you state that we reported that on one batch, which is incorrect. That's the point about which batch was tested. There was a misunderstanding about testing of donors. I made a special note at the time I talked to you that the original donations were tested by PHA. However, as CEP was used to test original donations, I am no longer surprised that we can detect one of your cryopulin batches as weakly positive for HBsAg. My comment about the warning in your leaflet was a personal observation, and I am aware that my own views and those of several of my colleagues do not coincide with those of the Committee on the Safety of Medicine. It does not surprise me if, it gives the batch number, was found to be HBsAg negative by Ausria 2 in Vienna and by MRC. We would expect it to be borderline or negative. Thus, I am not criticising either the Immuno test or MRC tests, and there is no disparity between results. I should make it clear to you that if Immuno use CEP screening on original donations, then they are certain to miss a proportion of HBsAg carriers amongst their donors, and that we may be able to detect HBsAg in the final product by RAA. Whether we can detect HBsAg in the final product will depend on the titer of the HBsAg of a missed positive donor, and also on whether anti-HBs from other donors has an opportunity to react at any stage in the processing with the HBsAg. And he invites him to come and see him if he wishes to discuss the matter further. Copied again to Dr. Andrews, Dr. Krask, and Dr. Cleghorn. What we take from that final letter, and indeed the series of correspondence, is that the apparent discrepancy is resolved by the fact that two different tests were being used. And it was the view of Dr. Dain that the tests that his hospital used were more sensitive and would pick up HBsAg infection that the Immuno tests would not pick up.
Am I right in thinking that the RIA test, which is radio immunoassay test, was one which became, at some stage in the mid-70s, the test applied in the UK to screen all blood donations for the presence of the potential presence of hepatitis B?
That is correct. In October 1975, so a few months after this.
So only a couple of months after?
Yes.
So Middlesex were ahead of the game, or it was in the process of being introduced. And the CEP test was the previous test, and it was known, I think, in the early 70s that when screening for hepatitis B was first introduced in 71, 72, that the tests were imprecise by comparison with those which followed.
That is my understanding, sir, yes.
So this would be Immuno using the less sensitive test.
Yes, whilst, according to Mr. Berry's letter, also experimenting on other tests that they could use.
And the difference between them, according to Dain's letter, if I understand this correctly, is that there wasn't enough viral load in the sample to trigger the CEP test showing positive. There was enough at the same level to trigger the RIA test because it was more sensitive. It picked up smaller quantities.
That's how I understand the letters, yes.
I see.
The only other point I would add is that RAA testing itself goes through different generations. So you have a first generation RAA test,
yes,
and then later a second and a third, which become increasingly more sensitive and more, if I put it, broadly reliable.
And it may be that RAA tests, because of the radioactivity which it involved and the slight risk that gave rise to, was itself succeeded by a further test in the mid-80s.
That is my understanding again, sir, yes.
Thank you.
The other point that I would draw your attention to from this correspondence is that it is correspondence not just between the hospital and Mr. Berry, but also the DHSS as well.
Yes.
They have been notified of this incident and are involved in...
And Mr. Holgate strikes a defensive tone in his letter. Is that because, or possibly because, there was a testing procedure on every batch?
Yes. So Dr. Holgate's response in the memorandum, we haven't got all of the documents which show how that was followed through, involves asking Dr. McGrath for the details of what was done about that batch. And that I understand to be a reference to understanding which tests were done by the British authorities on the batch which came through. And then the detail of what was done is contained in Mr. Berry's letter. So presumably he has liaised with the DHSS and he has indicated to them that material was not only tested in Vienna, but also by the MRC, that is the body at the time from the British authorities.
Yes.
That was testing it. And it was duly submitted, and authorisation notice was received from the DHSS on the 11th of June 1975.
Yes.
So between them, they have traced through the paperwork to understand what happened to that batch. And both the Immuno test and the licensing authorities' tests were negative. Therefore, the product was provided to the hospital.
Thank you.
One final observation from that is specifically about the warning and the leaflet. The criticism which Dr. Dain has isn't particularised, as lawyers would say. But in the letter of the 18th of July 1975, when Dr. Dain is aware of the different tests that have been employed, he says that his comment about the warning in your leaflet was a personal observation. And then he says, and I'm aware that my own views and those of several of my colleagues do not coincide with those of the Committee on the Safety of Medicines. He is not withdrawing his comments, and he is associating some of his colleagues with them.
No, he doesn't, however, say what warning he thought would be adequate.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. We haven't found any document in which he sets that out. So, Nick, if we could have on screen, please, ABI 5016. Page 1 of that document, please. ABPI 5016. Sorry, I think I garbled the reference.
I think you missed out the P.
This is taken from a publication called the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industry Data Sheet Compendium 1978. There are a number of these publications which aren't necessarily published every year, but are published fairly regularly. And they are put together by the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry, and they contain data sheets for some of the products which were available on the UK market. It was not compulsory, as I understand it, to put your data sheet in there. Some companies chose to do so, others did not. Immuno was one of the companies that did. If we could go, please, you can see on the first page that the first products they're talking about are albumin fractions and protein fraction Immuno. If we go to page 3, please. This is the entry for cryobuline. The section on presentation says it is prepared from the plasma of donors whose transaminase levels are constantly checked and whose donations are free from HBsAg. Pooled plasma and the final product are also tested for freedom from HBsAg. So a slightly different form of wording to that which was contained in the draft of the product license. But I don't make any submission as to that being in any way inappropriate. We don't have all of the communication that went between the company and the DHSS. If we go over to the contraindications and warnings section on the next page, hepatitis, despite the precautions taken in the selection and testing of donors and donations, the risk of transmitting hepatitis cannot be entirely excluded. That data sheet was in, as I say, the 1978 edition of the compendium. The same wording appears in the 1979 to 1980 edition. There is a slight change in the 1981 to 1982 edition, where it is now described as being produced, and I quote, from suitable human donors, and a footnote defines suitable human donors by reference to another work, the British Pharmacopoeia, which sets out certain standards that the pharmaceutical industry should follow. The reference to donors' transaminase levels being constantly checked was no longer present by the time of the 1981 to 1982 compendium, but otherwise the entry that we have just looked at was unchanged, including in respect of a hepatitis warning. One point which is slightly surprising, or we haven't found an explanation for, is that it's not until the 1981 to 1982 compendium that you get the reference to the RIA testing in the data sheet. As we know, that had been approved in October 1975. And I'm afraid we simply don't know why it is that it didn't appear, at least in that version of the data sheet, until the 1981 to 1982 compendium.
So, I mean, can you tell me from any source? It's one thing to test donations made for the general blood supply for the purpose of transfusions, to test those for the presence of hepatitis B indicators, and to do that by RIA from October 75 onwards. It may be another thing to test plasma products which have been prepared abroad, which have not been prepared from British donated blood. Was the testing regime for batch testing, was it still being conducted? And B, if it was that by RIA or was it by some other test? Do you know?
I don't know, sir, but there is that distinction between testing with donors and testing with batch, and it's something which comes up regularly across all of these products. If I may just have a moment about the 1981 to 82, the exact words used are, "It is prepared from the plasma of suitable human donors whose transaminase levels are constantly checked and whose donations are shown by RIA to be free from HBsAg. Pooled plasma and the final product are also tested from HBsAg." Now, it doesn't say how that final test is done. I don't know if there is any significance in that, whether or not it was also done by RIA or by some other test at that time. It's something that we can research. I wouldn't draw any inference from the lack of reference to RIA. It may simply be that it's more easily expressed that way.
But the first time that donors are mentioned as being tested by RIA is 1981, is it?
In the data sheets that we have from the compendium, yes. But there are various forms, many different forms of the data sheets which fly around. So the one that ends up in the compendium might not be the only one that is available on the UK market at the time. I have seen some information leaflets stating from 1979 where RIA testing is mentioned. That's the reference is SHPL 40665_076. But even then, I wouldn't like to say that was the first time it was mentioned. We have incomplete data from which to draw any conclusion.
But you can say, or you are saying, I think that's the first reference you found to it in this context.
It is, yes. But I would add that we have a fairly complete set of data sheets for cryobilin and prothromblex from Immuno in the 1980s, far less complete in the 1970s.
Yes.
The reasons for that we'll see in a second. The 1984 to 85 edition of the compendium of data sheets has the same entry as the 1981 to 82, and then no change in wording for the 1985 to 1986 editions. The references for those are ABPI 5037 and ABPI 5022. Of note is that neither of those data sheets makes any reference to AIDS, HDLV3, LAV, HIV. If we could have, please, on screen, Cernic, ABPI 5022 on page 1. We can see the outside of the book where the data sheet compendium. On page 2, please, Cernic. Then page 3. Under the section Date of Preparation, it says the data sheets included in this compendium were prepared or reviewed during the final quarter of 1984, and the compendium itself was published in July 1985. This is the 1985 to 1986 edition, so we can see that, rather like Beano annuals, they come out covering the year ahead of them. The data sheets themselves were reviewed in the final quarter of 1984. That's fairly typical for these publications. And the data sheet that is contained in this compendium, which was reviewed or prepared in the final quarter of 1984, makes no reference to HTLV3, AIDS, HIV, LAV.
Yes, and if one looks at that document you've got on screen and looks to the left-hand side, it says what you told me already, that the data sheets are prepared by the individual companies concerned.
Yes, that's right.
So they're prepared by Immuno in 1984, and they don't refer to AIDS.
That's right.
Yes, I see.
As we will see in some of the evidence that we will look at shortly, the data sheets appear to be prepared by Immuno AG, the Vienna-based company, with input and comment from Immuno Limited, the UK company. We'll come on to that shortly. If we could...
Can you help me? Do they continue to refer to the risk of homologous serum hepatitis?
Yes, the same terms are used in the hepatitis warning as that which we have just looked at.
Thank you.
In fact, let's look at page 22 to 23 of this document, please, Cernic. Cryobuline, you can see the presentation. It is prepared from the plasma of suitable human donors whose donations are shown by RAA to be free from HBsAg. Pooled plasma and the final product are also tested from freedom from HBsAg. Then over to the next page, please, Cernic. And the section headed Contra indications, warnings, etc. If we look at if we just go up a little, a little further. On the right-hand column, we get to point 2, hepatitis. Despite the precautions taken in the selection and testing of donors and donations, the risk of transmitting hepatitis cannot be entirely excluded. If we could expand out again, please, Cernic. You can see the rest of that section also says a low instance of adverse reactions is experienced with cryobuline, but the following may occur: allergic reactions, hepatitis, which is the warning I've just read, factor VIII inhibitors, and then there's a section on the treatment of overdosage. Could we have on screen, please, Cernic, SHPL 5066_001. This is a document that we brought up yesterday for a different purpose. We can see that it's dated the 20th of December 1989, and it comes from Vienna and from Immuno AG and is sent to Mr. Coombs of Immuno Limited. And it says, attached, please find a list and copies of all UK-specific cryobulin and prothromblex tests, as well as of the relevant neutral English texts starting from 1980. This is from Mrs. Deenhofer from the licensing department, the head of the licensing department. What I understand that to mean is that the 80-odd pages that follow contain both texts that were specifically prepared for the UK market and texts which the company prepared in English and are described as neutral English texts, which presumably were available for English-speaking markets across the world. It doesn't mean that because something is a neutral English text, it wasn't used in the UK market. It just wasn't specifically prepared for that UK market. The date is from 1980, and that goes back to that which I was just saying. That's why we have a good record from 1980. It's more patchy for the 1970s. If we could go over to the next page, please, Cernic. This gives a list of the data sheets that follow, and the numbers on the left-hand side are reference numbers, which are handwritten onto the sheets that are attached to the letter. The code MWG, and VA, and FG, and dates that follow. There is a separate document, which I won't take you to now, but I will give the reference so people can check it. It's SHPL 40185, page 4, and that provides the key to that code. MWG is when the date on which the text was sent for printing. FG is the date on which the text was released. That is the word that is used in the document. And VA is the date on which the text was withdrawn. By using those codes, we can establish when the documents in question were either sent to the printers, released, and or withdrawn. We can see that the documents cover cryobilin untreated, the TIM2 heat-treated method, and then the heat-treated cryobilin, which I understand to be the dry heat-treated. The untreated cryobilin also has a distinction between cryobilin red and cryobilin blue. That is a distinction between the European plasma and the American plasma. We will look at that shortly. I'm not going to go through today all of the different data sheets that follow. What I would say is that having looked at them, and everybody, of course, is free to do the same, in the data sheets that I have looked at from this period, there is no reference to the risk of AIDS or HTLV3 in any of the untreated cryobilin data sheets. The latest
or LAV.
Or LAV. The latest of which appears to have been withdrawn in July 1986, and I get that date from the right-hand column, VA, 11th of July 1986. So those sheets listed there don't contain any warning about HTLV3, LAV, or AIDS. Could we have on screen, please, Cernic, HSOC 0023097? This is a letter from Mr. Coombs replying to a letter that he has received from David Waters, the General Secretary of the Haemophilia Society. I haven't seen Mr. Waters' letter, but the tenor of it can be gathered from this reply. Mr. Coombs writes this: Dear David, thank you for your letter dated the 2nd of February 1987 concerning the warnings on the use of our blood products during recent years. We have not issued promotional material on our coagulation concentrates, which I assume is your main area of interest, and therefore our warnings have been mainly restricted to the data sheet and the insert leaflet packed with the product. As far as our non-heat treated products were concerned, the only warning regarding viral inactivation was on hepatitis, as at that time this was thought to be the only problem that could be associated with blood products. I'm enclosing a copy of our cryobuline datasheet for our non-heat-treated product, which was issued in March 1984 and contains our standard statement on hepatitis. This was issued from 1973 until the introduction of heat-treated products. As soon as our dry-heated product was introduced in March 1985, the statement was changed because of a problem with AIDS, and I'm enclosing a copy of the datasheet on our heat-treated product dated March 1985. This statement is fairly clear in stating that although we have treated the product, the transmission of viral hepatitis or of other viral infections cannot be excluded. You will also see on the front of the datasheet where it gives details of the heat treatment. It clearly states that this step is carried out to reduce the risk of transmission of infectious agents and not to eliminate them. I hope this provides you with the information you require, but if I can be of any further help, please do not hesitate to contact me.
Can you just help me with this? It's going back to his phrase, which I just picked up. As at this time, this was thought to be the only problem that could be associated with blood products. Dr. Eibel was an Immuno official, was he not?
He was.
He went to a meeting at the Excelsior Hotel at Heathrow on the 24th of January 1983.
Yes, he did.
At that meeting, Dr. Krask presented details on what was thought to be a real problem with blood products transmitting AIDS. Was he present at that part of the meeting? Do you know?
We don't know, but that is something that I'm going to address you on later. What is certainly the case from the minutes that we will look at later is that the question of AIDS was raised when he was present, even if he wasn't present for the subsequent discussion from Dr. Krask.
Yep.
The dates of the cryobuline sheets that we were looking at a moment ago range from being sent to the printers in September 1982 to being released in May 1983, but not withdrawn until July 1986. I won't take you to the data sheet that Mr. Coombs attached to the letter. It contains the same wording as those that we've looked at from the 1980 and 81 and 1984 to 85 compendiums, and it confirms the point that I made earlier that there is no reference to AIDS, HIV, LAV, HDLV3 in that data sheet. I will come back to the data sheet which is presented for the heat-treated product shortly, but before I do, I'm going to look at the blue and red pack cryobuline. We know, of course, from yesterday the distinction between the two being that the European plasma is in the red pack cryobuline, the American is the blue pack. There is a difference in wording in the way that the product is described in the data sheets that we have for those. If we could have, please, on screen, Cernic, SHPL 5066_1, page 19. This is one of the data sheets that was sent by Mrs. Deenhofer in December 1989. SHPL 5066_001. If we could have, please, page 19. The top left-hand corner, we can see handwritten on it, ROT, which is German for red. This is the European cryobuline. Manufacture and composition. Cryobuline is prepared from the pooled plasma of suitable human donors who have a GPT activity of less than 25 international units per litre. Each plasma donation is tested by radioimmunoassay, RAA, for the absence of HBsAg antigen and is only released for the production of cryobuline if the HBsAg antigen test is negative. That is what is said on the European pack. If we could have, please, page 16 of the same document. Top left-hand corner, blau, German for blue. Cryobilin is prepared from the pooled plasma of suitable human donors. Each plasma donation is tested by radioimmunoassay, RAA, for the absence of HBs antigen, and is only released for the production of cryobilin if HBs antigen test is negative. The distinction between the two there is the lack of reference in the American cryobilin to the test for GBT.
Yes, the earlier one says the donors are tested. This one says effectively they're suitable.
Yes, yes. But there is no specific reference to the ALT.
It doesn't say what suitability means.
It's the asterisk there is, if we could go down to the bottom of the page, in extremely small writing, suitable human donors as described in the British Pharmacopoeia 1980, Volume 2, under albumin. This is a formulation which is used in various data sheets by Immuno, and from memory, I think, by other companies as well. So it is referring to a standard textbook for the pharmaceutical industry.
And how does that, the British Pharmacopoeia, define suitability?
That's I don't have to hand, but we can bring that up, I hope today. If not today, then at the start of the next presentation. What the composition sections don't contain is any reference to the geographical origin of the plasma. If we look at the packaging, we could have SHPL 5071_130. This is an example of the red European packaging. It's not dated, but we can see that it is said to be distributed by Serological Products Limited, which would suggest that it dates from the early to mid-1970s, before the company changed its name to Immuno Limited. Cryobilin dried human antihemophilic fraction, prepared from the plasma pool of 1,000 AU-SH HAA negative donors. The product license is given there, and details about reconstitution. So that is the original European product at a time when only that product was available, before the American product was introduced. If we could now please go to MHRA 003321_022. Just as we are doing so, I note that there is nothing on that label, the previous label that we've seen, which identifies the geographical origin of the plasma. This is an example of the blue American cryobilin.
It's not very clear on the screen.
I'm afraid this is the best.
Isn't a better copy?
No, we don't, I'm afraid. We are struggling for examples of the blue cryobilin, partly, I'm afraid, because much of the material that we have is photocopied in black and white, so we're unable to tell which is which. What we can see is that the expiry date is March 1985. You can also see a couple of lines above that, if you can make it out, that this is actually a product which is for the Irish market, because it's the product licenses for air. So it's Irish rather than British. But what we can tell from this is that there is no reference here to the geographical origin of the plasma. It says the preparation is of human origin and cannot be assumed to be free of hepatitis virus. No reference to the donor pool size. And then it has information about reconstitution and administration of the product. Cernic, please, could we have on screen SHPL 5071_066. This, I'm afraid, again, it's not a great copy, but it is a fax dating from November 1978. It's from Mr. Berry, and it is sent to Immuno AG. You can see it's obscured by the redaction, but we can see in the top right-hand corner it's Fr. Dienhofer, so Frau Dienhofer. The name is added there, presumably for her attention. What the fax says is this. 1, we confirm that the factor 8 concentrate prepared from American plasma can be called cryobuline. 2, Immuno blue will be the most suitable colour for the pack. 3, there is no mention of plasma source on red cryobuline, so there is no need to mention it on the blue plaques. That is what Mr. Berry wrote at the time. As stated boldly as a proposition there, so you may feel that there is some difficulty with that logic. I would only add that Mr. Berry is deceased, and you will, of course, in due course, have to take into account the fact that he may have been able to give a further evidence about his thinking at the time and what lay behind that expression. And indeed, that is the same for all bits of writing or reported speech that we have concerning Mr. Berry.
Well, it seems somehow counterintuitive that the regulatory authority has asked for different coloured packaging to distinguish a product which is of European origin, the plasma for which is of European origin, and product for which the origin is essentially American. But there's only a difference in colour on the packs.
As I understand it, that is the position.
But equally, it has to be said, the UK HCDO appear to have known that there was a distinction, not least because they were paying less for the blue pack.
Yes, and as we saw from the price list yesterday, although the price wasn't stated, it was stated very clearly, blue pack is the European plasma and the red pack is the American plasma. So if you
other way around.
Sorry, the other way around, forgive me. Blue is American and red is European. If you know that code, then you know the distinction. If you don't know the difference in the significance of a difference in colour, there is, so far as I can tell, nothing on the labelling and nothing in the data sheet that will tell you about it.
So, insofar as any of these packs came to the hands of anyone administering, for instance, the treatment at home, there would be nothing to indicate to the end user, the patient, where the source material came from.
No. The only caveat I would add to that is I am unaware of any other piece of literature or documentation that accompanied the pack. It may be that others can bring that to your attention, but from the material that I have seen and that I've presented to you today, the person who was handed a pack of blue cryobuline would not know that was made from American plasma unless they knew the significance of the fact that the pack was blue rather than red.
And there's maybe a question you can't answer, but maybe as others can. But is there any indication that the Haemophilia Society was aware of this particular difference between the red and the blue packs, the cheaper one with a greater risk?
I'm afraid I can't answer that, but we can look into that. One further document that I would draw your attention to, sir, is SHPL 5071_061. I don't think that we need to bring it up. It is an undated fax from the same file that we have just been looking at, this file from Immuno, which does say that in the future, the origin of source plasma will be indicated on the accompanying test protocol of samples for batch released. That would seem to suggest that the plasma origin was sent to those who were conducting the testing in the UK on the batches. Where that information went to after that, we don't know. If we could turn now to the dry heat-treated cryobuline. As we were discussing yesterday, there was an application for a product license in February 1985. This is for the original generation of heat-treated cryobuline, dry heat-treated. That contained various drafts of labels and of data sheets in the same way that we have seen before. I won't bring those up. Instead, I will go to HSOC 0023098, please, Cernick, which is the data sheet that Mr. Coombs sent in his letter to the Haemophilia Society in 1987. The data sheet is for cryobuline, dry factor 8, fraction BP. Presentation, it says, it is prepared from the plasma of suitable human donors, the same reference is made to the pharmacopoeia, whose donations are shown by RIA to be free from HBsAg. Pooled plasma and the final product are also tested for freedom from HBsAg. There's information given then about the packaging. If we could expand, please, Cernick. I'm sorry, so this is the wrong page. It's page 3 that we should be looking at. This isn't the heat-treated product. This is the non-heat-treated product. Forgive me. This is the heat-treated product. We can see there, thank you, Cernick, but it's stated to be cryobuline heat-treated. The presentation, it says, it is prepared from the plasma of suitable human donors whose donations are shown by RAA to be free from HBsAg. Pooled plasma and the final product are also tested for freedom from HBsAg. The product has been heated at 60 degrees centigrade for 10 hours. This step has been introduced to reduce the risk of transmission of infectious agents. You may recall, sir, that a statement about how long the product was heated and at what temperature was a requirement of the product license. If we could go on to the next page, please, Cernick. We can see at the bottom right quarter, contraindications, warnings, etc. The same phrase is used, a low incidence of adverse reactions is experienced with cryobuline, but the following may occur. And point 2, despite the measures taken to reduce the risk, the transmission of viral hepatitis or other viral infections cannot be ruled out. That is the data sheet that accompanied the heat-treated product. Mr. Coombs, in the letter that I showed you a short while ago, wrote that he thought that it was, and I quote, fairly clear that although we have treated the product, the transmission of viral hepatitis or other viral infections cannot be excluded. The 1986 to 1987 editions of the compendium had a data sheet which has equivalent information to that. There are slight tweaks of wording, but I needn't trouble you with those. And that is the same for 1988 to 1989, and the references for those are ABPI 5030, ABPI 5031, ABPI 5024. The steam and vapor heated cryobuline. I'm sorry, before we turn to those, actually, we'll just very quickly go to the heat-treated labels. SHPL 5067, please, Cernic, underscore 044. And page 4, please. This is the draft label that was provided as part of a product license, and we can see that it is for the heat-treated product. The preparation is of human origin and cannot be assumed to be free of viral hepatitis. It's the warning that is given on the packaging. You'll note, sir, that the reference to the donor pool of 1,000 donors is no longer present.
When did that cease to be used?
We cannot put a precise date on it. What we can say is that this is February 1985, and it's not present there. I can work through the other data sheets and the code that we have and see if we can...
Well, it will be quite useful. The implication might be that the donor pool had got larger and larger.
It might be, sir. There is a document that I will show you later today which might weigh the other way.
Yes.
But
that's why I'm asking.
Yes. So steam or vapor heated cryobuline. As we heard yesterday, the first application was made in March 1986 for method 2 steam treatment. I won't take you to the label, but it includes the following words that, quotes, to inactivate potentially present viral agents, the manufacture of cryobuline includes steam treatment. The treatment reduces the virus titer in HTLV3 spiked samples of the product by 10 to the power of 4 infectious units per milliliter. The HTLV3 titer was determined after incubation with HTH9 cells and subsequent measurement of reverse transcriptase activity in the clarified cell supernatant. So a rather more technical description than the ones that we have seen before. In terms of side effects, it says, by careful selection of donors and plasma and the steam treatment process, the transmission of HTLV3 can be excluded. The above measures will certainly reduce the risk of transmission of viral hepatitis, but this cannot be entirely ruled out. The reference is SHPL 5065 underscore 031. That is for the method 2 steam treatment. A somewhat more cautious wording was contained in a further data sheet, and we can tell from the code that we looked at earlier that this was released on the 1st of October 1985 and withdrawn on the 27th of March 1986. It's SHPL 5066 underscore 001. And it says that the risk of viral hepatitis is reduced by careful donor and plasma selection and product-specific steam treatment. In all probability, the risk of HIV transmission can be excluded by the above measures. Nevertheless, a potential risk of HIV or other known viruses being transmitted remains. There was a further application. The application for method 2 steam treatment was unsuccessful, and so a further application was made in December 1986 for method 3 vapor heated product. And perhaps we can have on screen, please, Cernic MHRA 00333320 underscore 007. This is, we believe, part of the application that was made, and it's part of the draft of the data sheet that would be provided with the product were the license to be permitted. It says at the top, a low incidence of adverse reactions is experienced with cryobuline, but the following may occur. Then if we go down, please, Cernic, to the bit which is in slightly different font. The careful selection of donors and plasma and the vapor heat treatment process, which has been shown capable of reducing artificially introduced HTLV3 by 6 log steps, suggests that in the light of present knowledge, the transmission of HTLV3 can be excluded. The above measures will certainly reduce the risk of transmission of viral hepatitis. This is being demonstrated by the fact that upwards of 20 naive patients have been followed up by ALT tests for 4 months and have not acquired NA and B infection, but transmission of hepatitis cannot be entirely ruled out. December 1986 is, we believe, the time that this was used as part of the application. That product didn't receive a license, and so it's unclear if the information sheet was ever used in the UK market. One of the reasons given by the DHSS officials for the refusal of the license during a meeting in August 1987 was that, and I quote, "the statement on hepatitis and HIV risk in the pack insert is not acceptable." The reference is SHPL 40141_136. It's a document that we looked at yesterday. They don't go on to specify precisely why it is unacceptable. There is a document that we have which records discussions between representatives of Immuno Limited and Beecham, another pharmaceutical firm, from October 1987. And if we could have that on screen, please, Sir Nick. It's SHPL 608_108. The context of this is that Immuno and Beecham were working together on some products, and they had a shared mutual interest in proving the efficacy of the steam treatment that was being used by Immuno on their products. And we can see the date of the covering letter is the 3rd of November 1987. The meeting took place on the 13th of October 1987. If we could go to, please, to pages 3 and 4, Sir Nick, of the document. At the bottom of the page, the section on the Department of Health and Social Security says that the DHSS is now regarded as one of the most stringent licensing authorities for blood products. In the case of blood products per se, these are referred to the blood product group headed by Mrs. Sylvester. One of her staff, Mr. Slogham, has special responsibility for vetting any heat treatment procedures, and he is reported to be very thorough in assessing data. We go on to the next page, please. As a result of the increased number of abridged applications which have been submitted recently to avoid the new requirements for expertise statements, the blood products group now has so many abridged applications pending that it is claimed that it could be 15 months after submission before any new abridged applications will start to be examined. This chimes with the Evans and Cunliffe report that we looked at yesterday. Give me 1 second, sir. At the bottom of that page, Sir Nick, section on data sheets and insert labels, it says, the DHSS has also raised a number of issues relating to Immuno's data sheets. It was noted that statements on inactivation were often much more positive in continental Europe than would be accepted by the DHSS, who, for blood products per se, require statements indicating that although such products have been treated to minimise virus transmission, they cannot be guaranteed to be virus-free. Thank you, Sir Nick. We could take that off the screen, please. We could go now, please, to SHPL 40141_233. The previous document is provided to give some general context of the approach of the DHSS, or at least how that approach was viewed by Immuno Limited at the time. What I'm going to take you to now is correspondence between Immuno Limited and Immuno AG, showing a discussion taking place in and around October 1986 about the wording of the statement on HDLV3 inactivation that was used for the method 3 vapor heating, cryobuline. This correspondence is likely to have been prompted by concerns at that time about the Armour product, Factor 8, which had been withdrawn from the market. On the 30th of October 1986, Mr. Nicholson, in this fax to Mrs. Henningen in Immuno AG, proposes that the statement be changed to the following terms. By careful selection of donors and plasma and the vapor heat treatment process, the transmission of HDLV3 can probably be excluded. The above measures will certainly reduce the risk of transmission of viral hepatitis, but this cannot be entirely ruled out. That is the proposal that is coming from Immuno Limited. The reply is at SHPL 40141_231. This comes from Mrs. Deenhofer, the head of the licensing department. It says this: we have discussed your proposal with Dr. Kaiser and Dr. Schwartz. Both of them do not agree to use a statement which diverges essentially from the wording generally adopted by our company worldwide. The statement agreed upon during our May meeting is already a commitment on our part, since we generally state the transmission of HDLV3 will be prevented. We do not see any connection with the Armour product, which was heat-treated and prepared from unscreened material and caused seroconversion. Our product is vapor-heated and produced from HDLV3 negative plasma donations, and we have provided data for the HDLV3 inactivation in our preclinical study, which shows a 10 to the power of 6 reduction of HDLV3 already after 3 hours. If we used a weaker statement, such as proposed by Immuno Limited, we might also run into difficulties at a later date, should it become necessary or appropriate to use a stronger statement. We will then not be able to provide further data on HDLV3 inactivation. For the above reasons, both Dr. Schwartz and Dr. Kaiser are of the opinion that we should leave the respective statements as agreed upon during our May meeting. The statement should therefore read as follows, and I quote, by careful selection of donors and plasma and the vapor heat treatment process, the transmission of HDLV3 can be excluded. The above measures will certainly reduce the risk of transmission of viral hepatitis, but this cannot be entirely ruled out. You can see there the distinction between the more definite statement of Immuno AG and the one that was preferred by Immuno Limited. And the terms of the letter from Mrs. Deenhofer, you may feel, sir, are an instruction as to what should be done, rather than advice. If we could have on screen, please, Sir Nick, SHPL 50661_001. Page 28, please. SHPL 5066_001. This is a data sheet which is dated November 1987. No, forgive me, it's this one is from July 1989, but the same form of words was used in November 1987 and in April 1988. If we look at the section under side effects, the penultimate paragraph there, the state of the art suggests that it cannot be precluded with certainty that both known or unknown viruses which may occur in plasma are transmitted through factor concentrates. In all probability, the risk of transmission of hepatitis viruses is eliminated by careful donor and plasma selection and product-specific steam treatment. The product is safe with respect to transmission of HIV, HTLV3/LAV. This is a data sheet that is described as a neutral English data sheet, so it's not specific to the UK market, but it's one of those that was sent by Mrs. Deenhofer in her letter from December 1989. As I say, that one dates from July 1989, same wording, November 1987 and April 1988, pages 28, 30 and 32 of that same document. In November 1987, Mr. Coombs wrote to Immuno AG expressing his concern about that form of words. And if we could have on screen, please, Sir Nick, SHPL 508_097. Sorry, 608_097. Dear Mrs. Deenhofer, thank you for the information which you recently sent us concerning the registration queries. I am, however, this is the second paragraph, I am, however, concerned about the statements you have given under the heading side effects. In the first paragraph, you suggest that it cannot be guaranteed that both known and unknown viruses will not be transmitted through factor concentrates. And in the final paragraph, you contradict this statement by saying that the product is safe in regard to the transmission of HIV. Apart from that contradiction, I feel the final paragraph would certainly not be acceptable for the authorities in the UK, irrespective of the evidence that is available. It is always very unwise for a pharmaceutical company to use the word safe, and most companies would avoid this as a safeguard against legal action in case for any reason the product was found to transmit HIV in the future. I would appreciate your views on my comment. That, sir, seems to us to be a direct reference to the warning that I have just shown you. We don't have a response, or at least we have not found a response from Mrs. Deenhofer to this letter, but I would point out that the same form of words remained in data sheets that were issued in April 1988 and July 1989 in the neutral English form. All of the neutral English text that I've shown you about method 2 and method 3 steam treatment, and indeed all of the others that are contained in that file which I haven't shown you, use the phrase steam treated. And indeed that phrase is given prominence because it's part of the title of the product. The description, as we saw yesterday, was considered by the Committee on the Safety of Medicines Subcommittee on Biologicals to be, and I quote, a misnomer and unacceptable. The reference is MHRA 00333320_044. Internal Immuno correspondence shows once again that concerns were raised on this point by Immuno Limited and were communicated to Immuno AG. If we could have on screen, please, Sir Nick, SHPL 5065_038. This is tab 405. This is dated, it's not always clear whether this is the 2nd of May or the 5th of February 1986.
It looks like the 5th of February.
We think it is probably the 5th of February. This is written by Mr. Berry to Dr. Schwartz of Immuno AG. He says this: as requested by you, I have looked further into the phrases vapor heated and steam treated. Cooper and Gunn's classical textbook, Dispensing for Pharmaceutical Students, makes the following definition. Moist heat. Microorganisms can be exposed to moist heat by using hot water, boiling water, steam at atmospheric pressure, steaming, or steam under pressure, autoclaving. Sensible heat. The heat required to raise the temperature of water from freezing to boiling point. latent heat, the additional heat needed to convert water at its boiling point to steam at the same temperature. By inference, therefore, our inactivation process cannot, with scientific accuracy, be called steam-treated, as definition 3 has not been met, that is, the latent heat definition. One US company, Alpha, uses the phrase wet heat and is currently enjoying virtually all the commercial Factor 8 business available. In our view, we should use the official description, moist heat treated. If you agree, we will change over immediately to this description and use the following titles for cryobuline. He lists those titles. The response is at SHPL 5065_037. I say the response, it's not necessarily clear that this is the response. It is a subsequent fax from later in the month. And it's, again, it comes from Mr. Berry, and it refers to a recent visit that he has undertaken to Immuno AG. And in the section headed General, sorry, it's dated the 24th of February, 1986. In the section General, it is said, agreement that we adopt the scientifically accurate phrase, moist heat treatment. So it is Mr. Berry recording his understanding of what he has agreed with Immuno AG, that his suggestion has been suggested, it has been accepted. However, if we look at SHPL 5065036, we have a fax which is sent by Mrs. Deenhofer, the head of the licensing department. And it refers back to the telex, or a telex of the 24th of February 1986. What it says is this. 1. Following the discussion with Dr. Schwartz, we would like to inform you that we intend to stick to the term steam treatment instead of moist heat treatment to avoid further confusion as to the denomination of our method of virus inactivation. We are using this term in all English-speaking countries, with the exception of the USA, where the authorities have insisted on the use of vapor heat treatment. The subsequent application that was made for a product license did refer to vapor heat treatment. But as we have seen, the data sheets that were sent by Mrs. Deenhofer in December 1989 all refer to steam heat treatment. I'm about to move on from cryobuline to the other products produced by Immuno, and I note the time.
Yes. Well, we'll take a break now until 5 to 12. 5 to 12.